Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for a program preview for the Master of Science in Innovation and Venture Development. The MSIVD program is a brand new master's program that's starting this fall 2020 at ASU through a transdisciplinary partnership between the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering, the W.P. Carey School of Business, and the Herberger Institute for Design and the Arts. My name is Jackie Collins. I'm the graduate coordinator for the MSIVD program. So I am here to work with students throughout the admission process and in an academic advising capacity once admitted to the program. Today, we are joined by our program director, Cheryl Heller. She is the program director of MSIBD through a position between the three schools, and she is a professor of practice at ASU. In just a few minutes, she is going to be speaking with Torence Lu. Torence Lu is a co-owner and director of Spanner, where he enables a studio team of senior product designers to solve engineering challenges at high velocity and with design excellence. He also is a program advisor to our first cohort of MSIBD students starting this fall. And today he's going to be having a conversation with Cheryl about the concept of failing fast and common pitfalls for founders. So I will let them get started with that conversation in just a moment, but I do want to just let everybody know we expect to have a few minutes towards the end for a Q&A. So if at any point throughout this presentation you have any questions for Cheryl or Torence or myself, please do leave them in the Q&A section of the webinar, and we will get to all of your questions at the end. With that being said, I am now going to turn it over to Cheryl and Torence.
Thanks, Jackie, and welcome, Torence. I'm really thrilled that you are involved with our program. Our students are really lucky that you are an advisor, and also grateful for your time in having this conversation today.
It's my pleasure.
Great. For those of you, those people who don't know you as well, can you talk a little bit about your work, what you do, and how it is you come to know so much about being a founder?
Okay, sure. Well, I'm a co-owner and part of the executive team at Spanner. And Spanner is a product development engineering consultancy here in Silicon Valley in California. And while I'm not one of the founders, I've been with Spanner since the very, very beginning, day zero, so to say. So my points of view with regards to founders, like what's important, what it takes, what are the dangers to watch out for, really comes from all my years of experience supporting entrepreneurs who are trying to bring their hardware product through development and to market. So, and then also working very closely with the founders at Spanner. So there you go.
Fantastic. So what do you consider, if you had to pick one essential characteristic that makes a founder successful, what would it be?
Well, there is, there's the notion of flexibility, I would say, is really important. Flexibility and humility may be combined together, because if you're going to be flexible with circumstances, you need to have a certain dose of humility to listen to others, to respect circumstances and the ever-changing challenges that are going to come at you. I mean, there's this one picture here that's being shown that you know, any hardworking, you know, smart entrepreneur you know, has a vision of how things are going to be, and just also a path for like how we're going to get there. And oftentimes it's a very linear, you know, checklist of things to do and ending in success. But the reality is that, you know, there's all sorts of crazy, unexpected twists and turns along the way. So hard work is important. Perseverance is important, and I think that most people who dare to be entrepreneurs already have a good dose of that. But I urge, you know, yeah, flexibility, humility, self-care is also really important, because, you know, entrepreneurs tend to are willing to be martyrs. Then if you allow yourself to get past a certain point, then you're no good for your business or your customers.
That's great. But my observation is also that they are just tenacious. They're just not easily dissuaded from what they want to try to do. And that the flexibility is sort of part of it, but it's also a relentless pursuit of the goal. That's great.
For sure.
People, that's my dog, sorry. People talk a lot about failure, almost to the point where failure becomes sort of glamorous. And I'm wondering what your philosophy of failure is. Where does it live?
Sure. Yeah, well, I got my undergraduate degree in product design from Stanford many years ago. And one of the things, sort of the resounding battle call, so to say, of my undergraduate education is the notion of failing fast and iterating. And there is behind that a principle of seeing failures or valuing failures as opportunities to learn or opportunities to pivot. And that's so true. Now that I've been out in the workforce for 26 plus years, I've seen this sort of perspective on failure is true in engineering, business, the creative arts. It's also true with relationships because relationships will fail as well. I'm often inspired by one of my personal creative heroes, Thomas Edison, who would always who I think has a really good perspective on failure. When he was inventing the light bulb and trying to figure out what was the right material to use as a filament, he tried many hundreds of different materials, and someone questioned him as to why has he failed so many times, and his perspective was that he has successfully identified all of these different ways that would not work, and that allowed him to zero in on what would eventually work. So, oh, you're on mute right now, Cheryl. Help me out here.
Sorry, I was trying to keep my dog quiet. Do you think there are good kinds of failures and bad kinds of failures? I mean, it seems to me that failures in relationships are never easy ones, especially when you're in a startup, because the relationships are so important. But do you make a distinction between sort of healthy failures or useful failures and failures that are bigger setbacks?
Yeah, that's a really nuanced question, and I wish there was like an easy answer to that. Maybe my best take on it would be it's what how we resolve to make a positive outcome from the failures defines whether or not it's a lasting disaster, or if it's something that allows you to step to another level of growth in your relationship. If you fail in a relationship, for example, if you seek forgiveness and try and make amends and to do things that's right, while there might be scars and hurts from the past, what you do to make things right can actually make the relationship so much stronger and much more valuable. And as I've learned, with my work, it's not just about like how much I know and how well I do it, but it's about the relationships that I have that opens doors and opportunities to me. So right there, Nelson Mandela's got a quote there that he says, "I never lose. I either win or learn."
Yeah, it's wonderful. Can you talk about one or two examples of failures that benefited you, or failures that you were glad you went through after they were done?
Yeah, there was a period in my career about, I don't know, maybe a little bit over a decade ago, where I found myself in a situation where I was overwhelmed and chronically stressed out because of my work. And I felt like a failure every day because I was not able to complete the work that was my responsibility. But I also felt at the time that I wasn't able to manage the work and to work the relationships in a way to sort of defend my own priorities. as well as to care for myself. And that's why I mentioned self-care earlier as a really important priority. What I had learned from that is, well, you know, some of the things that I had shared earlier with regards to the priority of the things that I would suggest for founders or prospective students in the program to really look out for.
Fantastic. Do you have advice that you'd like to share with potential IVD students on becoming a founder or on failing?
Yeah, and this is sort of an amalgamation of a lot of experiences that I've had both personally and in observing founders who are clients of mine either fail or succeed. So in no particular order, I would say one is to be curious. And I think as an entrepreneur, someone who is bound to fail, I think if you have a attitude of curiosity to always learn and to be inquisitive about, well, why did that happen, or what can I learn? That's really important. I think prospective students would be really wise and really prudent to be intentional about building relationships. When you're in this cohort of students, you know, you're going to learn a lot together, but you may not know it now, but in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, these students or fellow students are going to be reliable advisors. They are inevitably going to be a business partner of some sort to you. So definitely build relationships. Also, don't be afraid to step beyond what's comfortable, right? You've got a year to really push it, to learn as much as you can. And so it's not the time to play it safe because entrepreneurship, venture, innovation is risky. So step out a little bit further than you're comfortable with, but also seek advice. Build a great team of advisors and mentors, and be committed to following through on what they share with you, because they know that's the reason they're an advisor or a mentor to you.
Fantastic. And speaking of mentoring, what do you want teams to learn from you in particular?
Well, I think well, there's many ways to answer that question, both from a hardware perspective, which is sort of my domain, and then also from running a business. But I would say probably the ability to, or the perspective, or learning how to learn from your own mistakes. And I guess it sort of ties into the whole topic of failing or failing fast, and having a growth mindset, which ties back into being inquisitive or to be curious. You know, when I look back at my career or in my personal life, and I think about all the times where I've grown the most or accomplished things that I didn't think were possible, they never came easy. And also they never, or almost never, happened according to the path that I had originally visioned. I would make mistakes along the way. Things would come out of the blue, the proverbial asteroid to blow up my plans, and also self-inflicted wounds as far as not knowing what I was doing and still rushing forth. So if I had better advisors, maybe I wouldn't have made those mistakes. But the fact is, even with the best advice, you're going to make some mistakes along the way. But if you view them as discoveries and opportunities to learn, then you can really make the most of it.
Fantastic. Are there things in particular that you want IVD students to understand about challenges related to hardware development?
Yeah, there are. Yeah, and thanks for that question. It really does speak to the heart of the world that I know the best. I think these days there's a lot of startups and a lot of value and equity put into software products. But there's this an adage that says hardware is hard. And hardware is hard because it's a lot more expensive. You have to deal with inventory and tooling. There are fewer experts in the field. There's also great opportunities, and it's never been easier than now in order to start a hardware startup with new CAD applications, simulation packages, consulting firms, or whatnot. But the main thing about hardware is that any prospective students should consider is that if you're thinking about starting up something and there is a hardware component, or if it's a hardware product, then it's really important to understand that there are special challenges associated with hardware that will require much more capital, startup capital, and sustaining capital. There's a lot more risk associated with it. And what might take weeks of development and iteration for software, as you can see on this figure here, roughly, would actually take months when it comes to hardware because the prototyping just takes a whole lot longer. So I'd be happy to share more with the cohort about hardware product development. There's so much more to say.
Fantastic. Well, you've talked about the fact that it's harder and that there are more challenges. Are there also greater rewards? There must be for you, right?
Well, I would say maybe to put the human element to it, one of the greatest rewards that I have is walking with my family through like a Best Buy or an Apple store and being able to tell my kids when they ask me, "Daddy, did you work on that?" It's a name brand product, or just walking down the aisle pointing at this and that. "Did you work on that?" "Yes." "Did you work on that?" "Yes." "Did you work on that?" "No, but they're a client of ours." So there's something cool, right, about being able to not just pull up an app on a phone, but to see a product being used at a friend's house. That's a real thrill.
Well, that's a pretty big thrill. Is it unfair to ask you what your favorite thing is that you've designed?
No, it's not. Unlike well, I'm a parent, and you're supposed to not have any favorite children, but
right.
I do have a few favorite products that I worked on in my career, and probably the top one, I don't even know if they make it or sell it anymore, but Leapfrog, the educational toys company for kids.
I know Leapfrog.
They came out with something along the lines of like a video game console called the Leap TV. And that was just one of my favorite products to work on because of the kids component. I've always enjoyed working on toys, but I was also fascinated with some of the engineering challenges that we had to solve. And plus the crew that I got to work with, they were just great people. It was a fantastic project.
That's really great. Well, before we end our conversation here, is there anything else you'd like to say that I neglected to ask you?
Well, we covered a lot of ground, and I think that most of what was on my mind, I did have an opportunity to share. But maybe just as a parting thought, for anyone who is thinking about going to do some sort of a hardware venture, one thing I didn't mention perhaps is that plan on raising a lot more money than you think you need, because your venture will almost assuredly take longer than you imagine. And I don't mean that as a threat, it's the reality. And I've seen that over and over and over again. And that's where relationships come in handy again. Who could be the door that opens to getting you funded.
Well, and that's where mentors and advisors come in. So thank you once again for your involvement in this program. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how you help our students. It's our privilege. All right, Jackie, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you both for having that conversation with us here today. To our attendees, if you have any questions for Torence or Cheryl about anything that they just discussed, like I said earlier, please feel free to leave your questions in the Q&A section, and we will be able to get to those in just a few minutes. In the meantime, I do want to take just a couple of minutes to talk to you specifically about some information about the MSIVD program if you're thinking about applying. So to go over the application requirements for this program, you would need to submit a copy of your undergraduate transcripts. You can do your unofficial transcripts through ASU's online application, or you can request your official transcripts directly from your undergraduate institution as well. If you're an international student, you may need to meet the English proficiency requirement. One option to look at for that right now would be the Duolingo English proficiency test that we are currently accepting due to some testing center closures due to COVID-19. And I believe that TOEFL also does now offer an at-home English proficiency test that you can look at as well. And then specifically for the MSIVD program, you will also need an up-to-date copy of your resume and your letter of intent. The letter of intent is going to be basically your chance to introduce yourself to the MSIVD program faculty. It should be no more than 3 pages or so double-spaced, and we're really just looking for our first chance to get to know you, what brought you to the MSIVD program, and what your passions are and what you would hope to accomplish through the program. If you are moved on to the next step in the evaluation process, we'll contact you with some additional questions, and then we will ask you to set up a brief online interview with Cheryl and a couple of our other program faculty. So we do have a deadline coming up on June 30th. If you are considering applying for our first cohort this fall 2020, we are still accepting applications, and I do encourage you to get your application in by that deadline. The link at the bottom of this screen is to our MSIVD webpage, where you can find a link to start the application. And then I did also want to just briefly share this graphic with you that gives you an overview of the MSIVD program cost. So it will break down the cost of the 1-year program, depending on your residency classification, whether you're an Arizona resident, a non-resident, or an international student. It is a 1-year master's program with classes taking place in the fall, spring, and summer. And you would be completing 30 credit hours total over the course of that 1 year. 12 credits in the fall and spring, and then you would be finishing with 6 credits in the summer. So we do have a few minutes for any questions that you might have. I do believe that I saw at least one question come in already. So give me just one moment to pull that up here. Oh, I see that was actually one of our admitted students just saying thank you. So, but I do actually have a question for you, Torence, as someone who has several years of professional experience working with engineering and project design. I wonder if you could maybe speak a little bit to what value you see in the MSIVD program.
Oh, I see a lot of potential, a lot of value in this program. Otherwise, I wouldn't want to be an advisor. But in particular, I think that there's a notion these days, I think that's perpetuated by a lot of success stories of entrepreneurs in the press, that somehow being a successful innovator is an easy thing. That if you work hard enough, you'll succeed. And maybe that plays into the whole American story as well. But what I've seen just through so many of my clients is that I've seen so many hardworking, well-meaning, sincere, intelligent clients really struggle. And if they had access to a program like this as a foundation before launching into their ventures, I believe it would have mitigated a lot of risk for them, and then also given them the tools perhaps that they needed to understand how to work through these sorts of challenges. So I think the studio type of environment for learning is a really great way to go about it. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing what the prospective students end up doing and the sorts of ventures that they end up establishing.
Awesome, thank you. Let me see if we have another question come in here. So one of our attendees has asked, what kind of relationship should we look to building with a mentor, and can I determine when some compensation might be warranted?
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, it's, what to look for, what kinds of relationships to look for in a mentor. I've tended to, I would say, take on mentees who have shown the initiative to want to be mentored. So I think that that's really important, that mentor does not alone establish the relationship, because if you want to be mentored, it really is up to you to seek out. So there's obviously, it's important to have some sort of natural connection, as well as either a similar background, similar field, or what is it, a certain aspirational aspect, to want to learn something from someone, even if maybe they're in a field that's a little bit different. So, but as far as compensation, that's I would say I have never observed a mentoring relationship be one that's paid. Although I guess there are consultants, right? If you were to say, if you're looking for expertise from a subject matter expert, that you can pay for a consultant to advise. And so that's maybe more on a professional basis. So, but paying for paying for a mentoring relationship is not something that I'm familiar with. That's intriguing. I would say that's curious. But yeah, I don't really have a strong opinion on it one way or another.
And I think I'd just like to add, I'm glad this person asked about relationships, because I think it's really important to remember that this is a relationship. And as with any relationship, both people like to be considerate. They like to have their time respected. And oftentimes students are afraid to talk to somebody, or they're hesitant to ask for something. But if you do just think about the mentor as a person who wants an opportunity to learn from you, perhaps, or what you're doing, as much as you want to learn from them, it's a much more beneficial and rewarding engagement for both people.
True.
Thank you. We have just a couple minutes left, but actually, if you don't mind, Cheryl, I have a question for you. I would be curious to hear a little bit about your philosophy about failure, and keeping in mind that failing is something that is built into the MSIBD curriculum, what you kind of see as the benefit of that for our students.
All right, so now I'm going to have to confess something. I will confess that, in the world, there's almost this fascination with failure. And people talk about the studio environment as being really an environment that's safe to fail in. In design, we only think about iteration, right? We think about the way that the whole process works is you try something and it's not that it fails. You observe what worked about it. You observe what you want to maintain. You observe what you need to modify to go on to the next one. But it's a really seamless, continual process. And what you learn to do is set up feedback loops with the people who are going to make you successful, whether that's buying your product or funding your organization. So you don't stop and think about it as failure. And I actually, sometimes I think we make so much of failure that what we miss is, the point is just to be aware of what you're learning at every point and using what you're learning. So.
Wise words.
But we'll keep talking about failure because it's on everybody's mind. And Torence, you did a brilliant job of talking about it and sharing insights into founders. So I'm very grateful and I thank you.
Yes, absolutely. We really appreciate you being here with us this evening. And thank you to everybody that joined us. I do want to just quickly remind you that our next application deadline for the MSIVD program is coming up on June 30th. So we hope to see your application come in if you have not applied already. Once again, I just want to thank Torence for being here and thank you to Cheryl as well for leading the conversation. And I hope that everybody has a really great evening.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. Thank you, Torence.
Take care. Thank you.